Haylesbury Manor. Heard of it? Property of Sir Henry Whitman. His solicitors have sent instructions for us to dispose of it by auction.
The Wheatmans of Sussex, eh?
The present Sir Henry is a distant relation, only just come into the title and estate after the last baronet died. Apparently he prefers to live abroad.
Perhaps I ought not to speak of it.
Peters, old fellow, if you finished with the bed, why don't you start on the fireplace in the next room? I shall join you presently. Now, Mrs. Musgrave, you were saying?
Well, sir, it may be that I ought not to be the first to mention it, but it's being talked of in the village, and if you didn't hear of it from me, you'd hear of it from somebody else, most likely. This house is haunted, sir.
Tales from the Pennyplants present The Tapping on the Wainscot, adapted from the short stories by Alan Upwood. Part 2, A Night at Haylesbury Manor.
Haunted? How? In what way?
You may believe me or you may not, sir. There are some who can hear it and some who can't. Some say it's only fancy and others that it's the spirit of Sir Christopher. But all I can say is I wouldn't pass a night in this room again, not if you were to offer me £50.
This was not very pleasant hearing. If a report of this kind were current in the village, it would be pretty sure to reach the ears of any intending purchaser and perhaps choke him off. An old family ghost of the traditional kind is sometimes considered an attraction to a venerable country seat. But any really unpleasant phenomena, particularly if of quite recent date, would be a very decided drawback in most people's eyes. Can you tell me exactly what you did here?
It is a tapping, sir. A tapping on the wainscot just over there. I was lying asleep in the bed, sir, for when the house was stripped and Sir Henry went away, I thought there would be no harm in my sleeping here, and I wanted to say I'd slept in the same bed as King Charles. But it's my belief that Sir Henry must have heard the tapping himself and seen something as well that frightened him, and that's why he was so anxious to clear everything out of the house and leave it.
Do you suggest, is there any reason to suppose that there was anything wrong about Sir Christopher Wheatman's death?
Wrong, sir? What should there be wrong? I'm sure the poor gentleman couldn't have died more peacefully. Miss Alice and I were with him the whole time.
Who is Miss Alice?
His daughter, or at least his adopted daughter. She had lived with him since she was a baby, and he made no difference between her and his own flesh and blood. And in my belief, it's on her account that Sir Christopher walks.
Why?
Because when Sir Henry came down, he turned her out of the house with nothing but the clothes she stood in. Sir Christopher hadn't made a will, and he came into everything as the heir. Miss Alice had to go to London and take a situation as a waitress.
You may leave by the end of the week. Here is some money. Mind, I shan't have you saying you've been ill-treated.
I will leave today.
As you wish. Of course, it needn't be like that at all if you agreed.
I have told you already, I cannot marry a man I do not love, and now I will leave.
Oh, Miss Alice, wherever shall you go? Whatever shall you do?
Dear Mrs. Musgrave, I shall stay with Elsie Summers, and she has promised me work in her brother's restaurant. You mustn't worry about me, really you mustn't. I promise I shall write.
Oh, Miss Alice!
Could there be anything in that strange suggestion? Was it not more likely that the old housekeeper's indignation at her new master's conduct had made her fancy that the ordinary noises of an old mansion by night were a protest on the part of the dead? And have you heard the tapping since?
I hear it every night. I have shifted my bed to half the rooms in the house, but it makes no difference. Wherever I am, the taps come. And then they move along the wall and by the staircases and the corridors till they reach this room and stop there.
Have you followed them?
I did the first time. Now I daren't. But I got Jim Bateman from the lodge to come up one night and he heard them and followed them and they led him to the same place. And now he would no more cross the threshold of the house after dark than he would fly.
It was clear to me by this time that, whether fact or fiction, the story called for investigation. I'm not naturally nervous, and in spite of the disagreeable memories of the last haunted house I had spent a night in, I determined to face whatever there was to face in Haylesbury Manor. Mrs. Musgrave's story gave me much food for thought on our return journey. I wondered what impression the house had made on Peters. What did you make of it?
Oh, a wonderful old building. I shouldn't be surprised if there weren't a few priest holes in there as well. Jolly place for a treasure hunt, what?
Indeed.
Mwah.
Good heavens, man. Are you hungry again?
Where are my manners? There's this tea shop made the most wonderful cakes. Care for a Chelsea bun?
I wouldn't have minded some tea. Measuring old houses gives one a thirst, I find.
Doesn't it just? Lucky, I thought to bring my flask. Tea? Or something stronger?
As we sat and ate and drank our way through ham sandwiches and tea, I mulled over the situation. I had arranged with Mrs. Musgrave to make up a bed for me the next night but one. Not in the haunted room itself. That I did not feel disposed to risk, but so as to enable me to be at hand when the mysterious tapping began. I was careful to say nothing in the office meanwhile, and above all to keep the matter from the ears of my lady secretary. Miss Sargent has a very special gift, that of second sight when asleep, and she had solved a previous mystery for me, that of the greenhouse, but at the cost of an experience to which I could not think of exposing her a second time. On the appointed evening, I returned, with a small dressing bag prepared to stay the night.
I've made up the room for you in here. It's not far from my room.
Why, this looks very comfortable. I thank you.
I'm sure I hope you will be, sir, as far as can be expected. Supper will be served downstairs.
You have a cook here?
No, sir. There's nobody in the village who will remain in the house after sunset. However, I make a fair supper, I think you will find.
Oh, I am sure of it. I take it you have heard the tapping again while I was away?
Indeed I have. And right urgent it sounded too.
I neglected to ask what time does it usually begin?
It's always been towards the midnight hour, ever since it began.
I see. The witching hour, as they say. After supper, Mrs. Musgrave nodded off to sleep in a rocking chair before the fire, while I lit a cigar and waited in some excitement for what was to come. The room in which we sat was wainscoted like all those on the ground floor. Every time a coal dropped from the fire or a window frame rattled, I fancied the mysterious summons had come and started nervously in my chair. I believe it is not merely fancy which causes us to hear so many more noises in a house at night than in the daytime, but that there is some scientific reason for it. Be that as it may, everyone must admit that the sense of hearing is more acute in the darkness than in the light. As 12 o'clock approached, I deliberately turned the lamp out, keeping a candle and some matches by my side. Hardly had I done this when I received a shock which nearly made me jump out of my chair. It was a tap, large, sharp and imperative, on the door of the room. In my agitation, the habitual phrase, "Come in," rose to my lips, and I uttered it at the same moment my companion woke with a start and stared about her wildly in the dim firelight. "Come in!
Oh, did you hear it?
Yes, did you?
Are you going to follow it?
Yes. Will you come?
Oh, I dare not. Give me the matches. Don't go till I've lit the lamp for my sake.
I had been drawn straight to the door of the death chamber. As I crossed the threshold and the huge four-poster bed loomed up in the shadow, the character of the ghostly sound underwent a change. Instead of a single tap, travelling with the speed of a terrified man fleeing from pursuit, it became a harried knocking, moving around the room behind the wainscot as if in search of something. I could have sworn that someone or something was feeling its way along. The daunting sounds arrived at the middle of the wall, opposite the foot of the great bed, and became stationary. Once, twice, thrice, that awful tap broke the silence, louder and more menacing each time. Then all at once, damnation, my candle's out! Who's there? If somebody is playing a prank, there will be the devil to pay for, I tell you. The flame of the candle turned blue and went out, leaving me in the stillness and the darkness with the feeling that I was not alone. I got downstairs again, I can hardly remember, but I am not ashamed to say that never was sight more welcome than the lamplight streaming through the open door onto the passage as I rushed towards it.
You've seen it.
No, but the light went out and I had no matches, and the tapping continued. It sounded quite frantic, as if somebody was looking for something.
That was part 2 of The Tapping on the Wainscot, adapted from the short stories by Alan Upwood, with Jonathan Brandt, Kate Feeney, Clive Marlowe and Julia Warren. Next week...
You must let me go down and spend a night in that room, Mr. Hargreaves.
Don't think of such a thing. I should never permit you to run the risk of such a shock as I had last night.
It is a matter of necessity. It is a matter of duty. I cannot doubt that tapping on the wainscot has a meaning. It is a message from the dead.
If you liked our show, please visit our website at www.talesfromthepennybloods.org and follow us on Instagram, Mastodon, and Twitter. You can listen to our other episodes on Spotify and YouTube. And please, spread the word among your colleagues, friends, and family.